Walking on the bayou with her by my side. She caught a crawfish, put him in a pie. She's Zydeco, Zydeco. She's Zydeco, yeah, Zydeco. I wake up in the morning, she's a pretty thing. Make me wanna sing. She's Zydeco, Zydeco. Hey, she's Zydeco, yeah, Zydeco. One more time. One more time. Wake up in the morning, you know she's a pretty thing. Make me tap my feet, make me wanna sing. She's Zydeco, Zydeco. Let me tell you now, Zydeco, y'all, Zydeco. One more time. Walking on the bayou with her by my side. She caught a crawfish, put him in a pie. She's Zydeco, hey, Zydeco. She's Zydeco, yeah, Zydeco. Hey, I'm here with Jay. Jay was recommended to me by a good friend of mine out of Petaluma. And I talked to him, I called him over the phone, and it didn't take me long to realize that, okay, I'm not talking to some nut here, I'm talking to somebody who's intelligent, and he's going to make a good subject for us here. So this is Jay, and of course I got my son Cowboy Donnie with me once again, my co-host. Jay, the birds are not real thing. Let's just talk about that first.
Yeah, I know you're a very knowledgeable guy about a lot of different kind of stuff, and I'm really interested to hear what you have to say.
Okay. So birds aren't real started completely as a joke, and one of the main things was to play it off, keep it with a straight face. So like the Facebook page, people would come on, instantly going, what is this? What are you talking about? Obviously birds are real. I have birds. I eat birds. But, and so you try and come up with an answer, even if it's preposterous. Just try and do it with a straight face. So try and make it seem as real as possible. Basically come off like a crazy person, but try and do it with a straight face. And it was pretty hilarious. It was pretty amusing for a long, long time. So many people I even know would come on there and be like, you guys are crazy. Do you really believe this? And I thought that was really, really amusing. It's kind of, the joke is worn out a little bit for me, but I'm starting to realize now what this has done is it's turned it the way that other conspiracies, so it can be written off. Like, anyone who's into flat Earth, people will say, oh, you're into flat Earth, you probably think birds aren't real and the moon landing, blah, blah, blah. They've become kind of equated with each other. So I feel like it's kind of had a, how do I say it? I mean, some people think it's a psyop, like it was literally created to discredit conspiracy theorists.
More legitimate. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm seeing how that is in effect and could very well be true. I don't want to say for sure that's what it is. It'd be impossible to say that, but it's a reality. It seems to be having that effect.
Okay.
The interesting thing I saw about that, I recently saw the 60-minute thing on that.
Right.
And I sent it to my friend, this mutual friend of ours in Petaluma. And I said, Joe, take a look at this. And a few minutes later, he called me back. He says, man, I had to cut it off. He says, I couldn't watch it. I go, no, Joe, you haven't gotten to the good part yet. Right. He hadn't gotten to the part where the guy
comes out with his real personality.
Yeah. I said, Joe, watch the whole thing. I said, you haven't gotten there yet. Then he called me back and he goes, oh yeah. But the odd thing that I found out about it is that they estimated about 1 million people actually got to believe that.
Right.
And even after he has had the show, because when I first watched it, I thought he was legitimate.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And
then
that-
he dropped the face.
And that's the fun part of it, is to
Yeah.
try and play it off with a straight face.
But the scary part is that there's still a substantial amount of people who started to believe that who are now saying he's part of the conspiracy too.
Well, the thing is,
this is possible. That was my point. It's working out that way, whether he meant for it to be or not. And there's some evidence that maybe he did mean for it to be that way. He's associated with some people who've been called crisis actors and shooting incidents and stuff I don't really want to touch, and there's no way to verify, but it's there. Doesn't hurt to take these things into account
and have these conversations.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure a certain percentage of the people that follow this are continuing the thread of taking something that's as simple but still outrageous and as birds aren't real, but then also at the same time using it as a commentary to show that there's so much about the world that we may not know, and just the fact of, or just the act of questioning that is important in society.
Absolutely.
Now let me ask you this: why do you think that there's so many folks that, whether it resonates with them genuinely and authentically or not, that are interested in having these conversations? Why are these narratives where that? Because this is something I subscribe to as well. I just want to hear your thoughts.
Sure.
I think there's a healthy distrust for the status quo, for the system, for the government. Why would you think that there's so many folks that that feel that same way as I do?
I mean, we've grown up. I mean, depending on your generation, for sure, mine maybe less so in the newer generations where it's less apparent, less obvious. But we have so many examples, even all throughout history, of why we should distrust the government and ways government can be nefarious and self-serving, or for the upper class, the rich. All these things. I mean, the number one for me growing up was just the fact that you can be arrested and put in jail, and I was for a plant. How ridiculous is that?
Right. Right.
And I know it's really basic and maybe not the most interesting. There's plenty of good examples, but really, when you're a kid growing up, and there's a penalty for this, for growing a plant outside, a serious penalty, and it's equated with heroin and cocaine and all these other things in terms of scheduling.
Right.
Even the Nixon administration, they told him that there was no reason to schedule marijuana. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't going to hurt anybody. But they had all kinds of other reasons for going through with it, which were self-serving, and I mean, we could keep going on with that example forever. But that's a really basic reason to mistrust the government and their intentions.
Well, this actually brings up something that many folks consider a conspiracy, but something that I think is true and is almost completely documented as being the reason why it's like that. There's some say that in the early 20th century, hemp was emerging as a sort of response to cotton as an alternative source, and so much of our late 19th, early 20th century, so much of our industry was based around the cotton production.
And DuPont.
And exactly, Charles DuPont, correct? And so, to take this plant that had these really beneficial, it's easy to grow, it's resilient, and it also has these psychoactive or non-psychoactive properties that can help a lot of people. But to take this plant, use those specific properties to sort of demonize it, and then make it so that the cotton industry remains supreme in the textile, and making of cloths and shirts and whatever, jeans. There's some that say this is the reason why this plant, so many years later, there's, such a large percentage of folks that are incarcerated are because of this plant, especially in California. We have people that are doing huge sentences for something that is now legal to go to the store and buy.
It's ridiculous.
You know what I'm saying? So can you maybe do you know much about this? You mentioned DuPont, you might know more than I do.
Yeah. So there's a great book about it, Jack Herrera's "The Emperor Wears No Clothes," I think is what it's called. Most people in the turn of the 19th century, excuse me, weren't aware that hemp and marijuana were the same thing at all. So when they started trying to demonize marijuana with all the reefer madness and saying jazz musicians, they're gonna steal your daughter, like all this kind of stuff. It was pretty easy, in a predominantly white, affluent country who was slightly xenophobic, or very, very much so. So it was really easy, and a lot of people seem to have evidence that DuPont was the one behind doing this, and it really wasn't about that at all. They just wanted to corner the market where hemp had been the number one thing. They created nylon, the synthetic fibers.
Right.
So there's good evidence for that. I think it's pretty obvious, but yeah.
There you go. Well, it really seems that a really good reason why a lot of these maybe more extravagant theories are sort of rooted in things like marijuana being demonized because of the cotton industry, or the cover up of a lot of the things that are that the how do I say this, the police arm of our government, like those 3-letter agencies have done, like specifically here in California, and specifically here in the Bay Area. There was a group of folks that were, testing a psychoactive chemical on folks to see their reaction, and it was a big conspiracy. People were saying, "Oh, that's not true. That's crazy." And then these documents were released, and the program was called MK Ultra. Exactly.
Absolutely.
And then there's some speak that the Mansons were involved with that. I don't know about the legitimacy of that, but these things that have come to light in the past are sort of it makes it so that folks are able to get behind, like I said, more extravagant conspiracies. Now, something I find very interesting are all the coincidences in the world, in the Earth specifically, that just seem to be almost too good to be true. Like, for example, there's 24 hours in a day. The Earth is roughly, I think, 24,000 kilometers in circumference, and we happen to be rotating allegedly at 1,000 kilometers an hour. Right? That seems a little bit strange. That's very, now, for example, there's, other planets that rotate at a day a year. You know what I'm saying? There's other planets that do all kinds of stuff, but it just so happens that ours, meets that criteria. Similarly, and a little bit more apparently, the moon and the sun, from the Earth's perspective looking up, are just about exactly the same size. But that doesn't make sense because the sun is obviously way bigger than the Earth, is what they say. And so they tell us that the sun is 400 times larger than the moon, but it also happens to be 400 times further away. Now these are coincidences, one could say, but it almost seems as though there's a lot of evidence just that is commonly accepted by science that seems almost too coincidental for it to be the case. Now, if we look back throughout history, obviously there's a lot of folks who have proven that the Earth is round, but then there's also a lot of folks that have proven that the Earth is flat. So, I know you might be more well versed in the subject than I am. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. There's so much information about it. I wouldn't even know where to start, so I'll just try and jump in somewhere. The flat Earth thing, it started, I think around 2015, something like that. And there was a bunch of things that sort of prompted it. One of them was actually called the lunar wave, where people were videotaping this effect of the moon, essentially acting like a hologram. You could see ripples through it. I don't know if you know this, the Royal Astronomical Society on many occasions has photographed stars shining through the moon, which shouldn't be possible at all, but it's well documented. So there was some things that prompted it, and depending how conspiratorial minded you are, a lot of people think also that Flat Earth was a psyop created to distract people from all these other anomalies, things about NASA which don't add up. The moon landing is a huge one. I mean, we could literally spend hours talking about that.
I'd like to touch on that for a little bit, 100%.
Sure. But when it comes to the Flat Earth, myself, and I think almost everybody who's really into the subject started off going, this is bullshit. Right. I mean, I'm just gonna, most people won't give it the time of day. I've had so many people, like I said, even just talking about doing this interview who are like, oh, you're going to talk about flat Earth? Like, please don't.
But it's inherently interesting.
It's inherently interesting, but the cognitive dissonance against it. So that's what's amazing to me. Someone doesn't go, wow, what are you going to say about that? I can't imagine there's anything to say. Instead, it's don't talk about that. Right. That would mean you're wrong. That would mean you're stupid. That would mean you're crazy.
And if you were paying attention to the internet in like 2016, 17, 18, there were huge swaths of folks that were interested in posting about that on platforms like YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or whatnot that were there's a term called shadow ban. Right. Absolutely. So for those of you guys that aren't aware, people generally find stuff online either by searching it up or just by coming through your feed. Not by somebody sending a link, but if somebody has something they want you to see, they can do that. To be banned from a platform is nobody can see your stuff. You're essentially a ghost online. Nobody sees it. Right? It's gone. But to be shadow banned is if you search something up, you won't find it unless you have the exact link or you go to the exact page and search from there. And so essentially this is sort of keeping people from seeing this information. And it can definitely seem as though the government or the social media websites or the powers that be, if they do something like this, it means they're sort of trying to hide something. So it definitely does give a lot more
credence to it.
Yeah, a lot more credibility to these things if folks are trying to cover it up or hide it.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. No, it used to, so they claim that the algorithm was changed on
Mm.
YouTube, as they did with Facebook, as they did with all these different social media platforms.
Right.
And it became impossible to find specific pieces of information, even if you knew the keywords, even if you knew the title and the person who published it.
Right.
You can't find it putting those things in. So yeah, I mean, I guess it could be argued that it was just the algorithm, but literally the whole thing changed overnight in terms of what information you could find, what you had access to, and what would be suggested to you.
All right.
Coming up. So that was huge, and that's interesting, and it,
I'm sure it put a lot of fuel on the fire, 100%.
I mean, and so this is the other interesting thing about flat Earth, is if it's so dumb and so ridiculous, why did Obama name drop it? In one of his speeches, he kind of makes a joke about flat earthers or the Flat Earth Society,
Mm.
and it was brought up a lot, and it makes me feel like people were pointing towards it, so they can say that's stupid, that's ridiculous, and then if you wanted to bring up other relevant things, which really deserve investigation or at least a conversation about, you just get lumped in. And the extreme of this is birds aren't real, in my opinion.
Got you. Okay.
So-
Okay. So this is sort of so birds aren't real can almost be thought of, if you're not taking it literally, as sort of a commentary on how, either you can look at it in two ways. A commentary of either how people will follow something people are willing to follow something because they have this inherent trust in the government, and especially with the Big Brother thing, surveillance, and the things that like Snowden came out with, talking about how we're being watched and all these things that people would have called a conspiracy definitely before then. Or it could be looked at similar to the flat Earth as noise, white noise, to sort of distract the folks from actual issues, right? Like politics, from healthcare in the United States and homelessness in the United States, or even abroad, if you want to talk about the Uyghur Peninsula of China, or terrible things that are happening in the Middle East that shouldn't be happening. And so it would make a lot of sense to try to draw attention from these things by, as you say, shining objects. I hear you say from time to time.
That's it.
The flat Earth is never really, the flat Earthers have always been around.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from way back. I'm just wondering how much actual proof can you have that the Earth is flat? I'm finding that hard.
So this is actually what's amazing to me, and this is why, like I said, everyone who gets into it and really spends time on it starts because they go, this is bullshit. Like, let me look at this. I'm going to disprove this in 5 minutes. Well, there's actually a ridiculous amount of evidence, and this is one of the things I love about Flat Earth, is a lot of these people get so into it, and there's a lot of brilliant, it's what Neil deGrasse Tyson called an anti-intellectual movement, but really it's one of the most intellectual movements I've ever seen. You've got very famous scientists, physicists, all kinds of people who are really interested in this, and one of the first things that happens is people go out and try and test it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We get the way the globe Earth works and all the subtle nuances. We start getting indoctrinated from when we're like 5 years old.
Yeah, the first thing you do in science class is you build a little,
because it's completely counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense when you're a kid. You're going, wait, so I'm stuck to this ball. It's like a ball spinning, but when I see a ball spinning, things fly off. Like, there's so many things here that, it's just we've been exposed over and over our whole lives. So we accept a lot of these things. And I feel like most people throughout their lives have these things where come up that go, wait, how come it's daytime but I've seen the moon and it's like, there's so many just little observations that you learn to ignore. You sweep them under the rug because you go, well, you know what I learned in school, that's right. Galileo, Kepler, all these things. People have been doing this. I mean, we could get into the fact that it's all been Jesuit, Vatican, Freemason controlled, but that's
I don't know about that actually. In Egypt, I think the first folks that presented the theory that the Earth wasn't flat were the Egyptians, way back in the day.
That it was flat.
that it was not flat.
Okay, so Aristophanes, I believe that's his name, which you learn about in school books. He put his stick down and had someone walk some miles away.
Yeah.
So this is the main one you learn about, but there's actually all kinds of variables in that, which you don't learn about. It could, off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure there are other ways it could work, is if the sun was closer and we were larger. There's a few different ways, and this is usually given as a proof. And I don't believe he even thought the Earth was. I'm trying to remember exactly.
If I remember specifically, again, I learned this a long time ago. But what they said he did was he had tried to stick in the walking for a while, and then he eventually got enough backing to erect two obelisks.
Right.
They were, one was like in Alexandria and one was like further away. Had somebody walk, count the days, and then X amount of time after the initial meeting, they had kept track.
Right.
They both measured the distance that the obelisks threw a shadow.
Absolutely.
And they learned that if they was the same and the sun was, assuming the sun is a fixed point, if they were the same height and that rays are parallel, which makes sense because if something's really far away, even if it's a couple hundred miles or a couple trillion miles or whatever, the rays will be almost parallel because it's a single light source and it's traveled so far. Whereas if you're closer, it may be more diagonal. That's besides the point. So if assuming the rays are parallel and two things are this far apart and it's a single light source, they should throw the same amount of shadow. But if they show a different shadow, it's because they're not parallel. It's because they're curved like this, and so therefore the Earth is round, right? So there are variables that could be in play, such as the terrain. You may not be at the same distance from sea level, such as how plumb, I believe is the right term, it is to the ground. Is it at a right angle? Is it slightly curved one way or another? But it is a study that I believe has been replicated a bunch of times and generally is
so there's a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, there's so many interesting things, and as I was saying, all these people who are really into it now and trying to move it forward started off trying to do all these experiments on their own to disprove it, essentially. And none of them could observably do that. Even Einstein has a quote about it's not observable to show that the Earth has curvature. And here's the number one proof, and the thing that really, really got me is, so as the size of the Earth and the curvature is, it should curve at, I believe it's 8 inches. 8 inches per square foot of drop of curvature as you go away and of the horizon.
8 inches per square foot.
Well, yeah, but it goes, because it's squared, it ends up being more and more, and from your perspective, it goes down and increases gradually. There's nowhere on the Earth where you can see curvature.
Well, so there's this one place that I've heard about. I was talking to a friend about this. There's this place in Belgium. It's a wind farm. It's called, I believe, Thornton Wind Farm.
I heard about that.
So basically, if you're standing along the coast and you're looking out into the farm, and this also is predicated on the tides, because generally most folks find that the tides are because of the moon and the sun, and so the Earth sort of rotates within these two bulges of water. But if you catch it at the right time, you can actually look out on the wind farm, and in the mills in the middle seem more to be covered more than the mills on the outside. And if you take a picture just almost with the naked eye, you can see it, but especially if you do a little bit of calculus, you can sort of see just slightly the curvature of the Earth.
Interesting, because there's literally thousands of people who are doing these experiments. It's observable with the Hawaiian Islands. There's many you shouldn't be able to see from one another because of the curvature, and they're right there. There's people who've done it with lasers, and with the Statue of Liberty, it can be seen, I think it's 60 miles away with nothing changing. Lighthouses are really common ones. So I personally, when I got into it, I was looking for any evidence of this. And then after this had been around for a while and more people are doing this, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who loves to talk shit about flat earthers, he starts going, it's never possible to see the curvature of the Earth. We're like, and he holds up a ball, he says, if you're 2 millimeters off this ball, no one could ever see it. Even from space, people are launching balloons, amateur balloons, pilots are going as high as possible. No one has ever observed any curvature, and and as far as I know, it's never been verified. I mean, there's never been verifiable curvature once, and all the scientists seem to admit that there's no observable curvature.
Okay.
But the math does not make sense. You
I agree.
absolutely should.
I agree.
You absolutely should see curvature. So this is the number one thing that I think gets most people about the flat Earth. I'd be curious. Afterwards I'll ask you a little bit more about that and check it out.
Yeah, we'll reconvene and compare sources and maybe put it in the comments or something.
Yeah, we'll do a follow up on this also.
So let me ask you a question. From the perspective of if somebody were to subscribe to these beliefs, what would be the explanation for why all of these governments from different countries would sort of collaborate to further this agenda?
Right.
That's the thing.
There's so many reasons you can think of. I mean, the number one is to control and keep us dumbed down. You don't really want people getting as scientifically oriented or minded as your people that you're paying to do that and keep it on top of technology. The flat Earth map is a really trippy thing.
Generally the one I see, for those who aren't familiar, is the center. So imagine a plate. At the center of the plate, you see the North Pole.
Yeah.
Then around that, you'll see Alaska, China, Russia, etc., moving out down towards America, Latin America, Africa, etc. Australia sometimes isn't there, and then around the edge will be imagine the South Pole right up.
Yeah.
Instead of the globe like this, it's opened out, and then there's an ice ring around. Some people say it's an infinite plane; it goes on forever. Some people say that there's a dome. And then some people just say the edge after the edges have dropped off.
So the Mercator map is the name of it, and it's with the UN flag, I believe, is what it is. They use the exact same thing, which definitely does not. It doesn't keep anyone from thinking anything about it.
Yeah, for sure. It propagates a little bit.
It's got to be. And one of the amazing things is a huge part of this is Antarctica. Antarctica is so relevant to it because it totally changes how we've been taught and the layout of the Earth. But no one can get there. Antarctica is the only treaty that the entire world has kept, is that it's no man's land, no one owns it, and yet we see all these really interesting people going down there for environmental reasons, perhaps. There's something trippy going on with Antarctica, and no one is allowed to even approach it. If you start going certain places by boat or by plane, the military will come intercept you, and they'll even shoot you down.
There is one exception to this: Metallica. Metallica was the first band to perform on all 7 continents. Somehow they got down there.
They made it to one of the bases or something. Okay, well that's really interesting.
I'm just saying
really
that
cool.
jokingly.
No. That's interesting, and it's not like people don't go there, but there's so many things they could do.
Because you can't fly over it. They say
no.
None of the because you can track it's open source, I believe. You could see the flight paths of everybody.
Yeah.
And nobody flies in that direction. Though it would make sense if you want to fly from the tip of Argentina to the tip of like what is it, Cape. The southern tip of Africa. Yeah, it would make sense to almost fly that direction.
So this is the other thing that interests me so much. So you'll see, again, Neil deGrasse Tyson tends to be the most vocal one about flat Earth.
He's probably the most famous scientist right now.
So there are so many things that could be done to disprove flat Earth.
Right.
Like, just like that. Little experiments, little videos of midnight at the South Pole, all these different things could be done. So either they're purposefully trolling, and they never address the real arguments. They'll make up straw man arguments about, oh, you guys think this, well, that's not true because of this. They never actually take on. He was supposed to have a whole conversation on Joe Rogan with one of the leading flat earthers and backed out of it. So whether
Yes, he did.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah,
I have heard him say this a couple times that he doesn't like to have. I've heard him say this for years that he doesn't like to have debates, especially when he's on the side of quote unquote absolute truth. Because then, if he happens to be across from somebody that happens to be more charismatic, and there's. He says that he doesn't see any merit in debating an absolute truth.
That's interesting because he gets pretty charismatic about being anti-flat Earth and doesn't offer any substantial arguments, I find. Anyway, so this is one of the other interesting things is there's so many ways that someone with resources could explain flat Earth as being totally wrong with a few experiments. no one ever does that, and no one ever takes on the serious issues. No one addresses the curvature of the Earth thing. They just say, no, that's not right, but no one explains, well, I mean, even on a calculator of a globe Earth, you can figure out what the curvature is.
Right.
And it should be very, very apparent everywhere. People are doing experiments with lasers. There was this interesting Netflix documentary about Flat Earth that came out that just had to be disinformation, because they kept trying to allude to making flat earthers look like idiots. Like,
I have seen a really famous experiment that was done allegedly by some flat earthers, where they had tried something similar to the laser, and
it didn't work.
Yeah, they found like somebody
that was Netflix. That was the Netflix special.
So-
Special I'm talking about. So why would a flat earther? Sorry to interrupt. Why would a flat earther make a video with this information? There's other things where he made himself look like an idiot and disprove the things. There's so many people who have done this. People who aren't even flat earthers, who are just trying to figure out where's the curvature, and they've done it with lasers.
Okay.
When architects create things, suspension bridges, train tracks, none of them ever account for the curvature of the Earth.
Funny enough, there's a bunch of documents in NASA that have been released that never account
Flat,
for the
non-rotating Earth.
flat non-rotating. But
Yeah.
if you dive a little bit deeper into those particular documents, you
Yeah.
find that when you're traveling, unless you're really like circumventing the globe, the rotation and the curvature of the Earth very rarely ever comes into play, right? Like if you're flying a drone over, let's say even like the whole country of Afghanistan,
Yeah.
you're not really going to be having to interact with that. And so when you're doing like advanced physics like this, oftentimes to make it more simple, you sort of take out parts of the equation that don't influence the equation.
Variables, yeah.
And so you could see like how somebody's saying the words flat onto a rotating Earth in regards to doing these calculations where those two variables don't come into effect.
I get that.
Could be misconstrued. Some would say.
I agree with that. I agree
Right.
with that. And there's so many things like that too, where they try and show stuff from NASA or. I mean, the architects is actually a pretty huge one. When creating a suspension bridge, there's some famous quotes from architects saying, "Yeah, the curvature of the Earth is only taught in schools to school children because it's ridiculous." What they meant by that and alluded to doesn't necessarily mean they were flat earthers.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that we get taught that at such a young age. And it's not actually taken into account in anything. Nobody takes it into account.
You could say, but I could say the same thing to. I'm like an engineer.
Yeah,
I could say the same thing about calculus.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
calculus is definitely important, regardless of whether or not you believe it applies to the surface of the Earth. Calculus is definitely an important thing to learn. But once I finish with school,
Never
going to use that, right?
I
So
know.
similarly, if you're building suspension bridges over, let's say a mile long bridge. The curvature of the Earth wouldn't necessarily affect that at those distances. Right, would you say?
Well, it should. I mean, to me, the truth is I'm not an architect, so it's not. It's
I
not
wouldn't
even
think
my
it
place
would.
to comment on it.
Right,
But
right.
it sure seems like that should make a difference. Or doing like super long suspension bridges and things like that. 8 inches squared per mile is pretty big. It gets significant pretty quick.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many like suspension bridges are like longer than a mile, and if you're taking into account 8 inches in a mile, then that would be, not negligible, but like there'd be almost enough sway within that bridge, because these things they do move, especially here in California. We have to always equate for earthquakes and things like that. Right?
So I agree. So this is just the thing. I actually have a bunch of notes on it on what the exact numbers for the curvature are. I would encourage people to go check it out for themselves.
100%.
Because yes, I mean originally when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, that doesn't seem like that big a deal, but it becomes a very big deal very quickly.
Right.
One of the other things that really interested me or got me more interested is I have a friend who's a pilot. He's an Army pilot. And he was flying some plane that went as high as planes can go. And he posted a picture from it, and he said, you can almost see the curvature of the Earth from up here.
Almost.
And got me thinking, I'm like,
You mean almost?
you can't. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you couldn't see it in the
That's
picture. And I'm going,
interesting.
you have to. That has to. There's no way that you couldn't. So it's we can have intellectual thoughts and debates, and I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a physicist, I'm not an architect.
Yeah.
So I'm not an expert on that. But from everything I've read, the curvature is the number one thing that interests me, and I've never seen any proof of it.
Well, can I talk about or ask some questions that you may have information about one of the things that interests me the most?
Sure.
I'm a big history buff.
Yeah.
I'm a big history buff. I feel like history has a tendency to repeat itself, and I also feel like you can learn a lot about why things are the way they are today by looking back in history. Now, if one were to subscribe to the flat Earth theory, would you say that history has been misrepresented or even falsified, because it seems as if you look back, there would have been a point at which history couldn't be presented as true and have this, you know, big conspiracy to hide the fact that the Earth is flat be prevalent today. Can you talk anything about that?
History being true, like that's already so complicated. There's so many peoples whose histories get erased. There's so many histories that are put forward. I mean, really, most of our history is put together by the Vatican, and it's not necessarily completely accurate. I mean, who knows? We weren't there. There's no way to actually say what is and isn't real.
I would say a lot of history has been going back through manuscripts that have survived time. You know, going back through records of records of fossils and things of that nature, and sort of as opposed to top-down inductive, like bottom-up deductive, right? Trying to find as much evidence as there are, and write a narrative off of that. Oftentimes, this is the case in old manuscripts and old things like that. And do you think that again, the Vatican, being a major compiler of historical documents, could obviously give them the opportunity to influence the events of the past to a certain degree, but would you say that history, the way it's presented today, could not be the case if the Earth is flat? Or would you say that's conflating the two?
That's a complicated question. So you know, they found textbooks from the early 1900s where the Earth was still taught as flat in some places.
Hey, I mean, the Earth is 10,000
in America. No,
the Earth is 10,000 years old, still taught in some places today.
Yeah. It's really complicated. There's a lot of people who feel the whole way that the globe Earth, the heliocentric model came to be, was very much planned out as Hegelian dialect. You know, one person said, okay, we're the center of the Earth, but it's ball. No, the sun is the center of the Earth, it's a ball. Well, either way, you've got ball Earth coming out of that. And normally they would have killed these people as witches instead of going, they're all Jesuits and friends of Jesuits. And going, okay, tell you what, you just take the last few years of your life on house arrest really quick.
Or send you out of this country or whatever.
This seems premeditated to me as what they were trying to put forward. Not to mention the Bible clearly is not heliocentric. The Earth is supposed to be the center of everything. Right. And you know, we could get into the firmament, the waters. This is a big thing for Earthers. And again, I like to say I'm not actually a flat earther, but I find find the model super compelling and intriguing because I wanted to disprove it. Of course. I wanted to show how it was inaccurate, and the more and more I look, you can't. And it's a model, it's a theory. Even gravity is still a theory. There are all these things that may not be proved and probably could be proved, but aren't, and it makes it that much more of an intriguing pursuit.
Well, so gravity is a really interesting thing that you know. So for the way that we understand the world, if something's over, I forget exactly the metric, but if something's over a certain time, it tends to attract towards itself, right? Also, you know, something that we can observe here on Earth is you know, things like bubbles, things like water. They generally tend to take a spherical shape because that's where you can put the most amount of volume into the least amount of space, right? So like, you know, for example, you blow a bubble, generally it's going to be round. If you put a droplet of water and you take it in slow motion, generally it's going to be round. And so if you were to take the creation of the universe from a generally accepted secular position, you would say, you know, a molten ball of rock, if it's liquid, it would be round, right? Now this happens with things that we observe that don't necessarily have gravity, but the generally accepted take is if something's large enough, it will attract towards itself, and so it will try to create the most space effective because all the things are pushing, and that generally creates a round shape. So gravity and the generally accepted version of the flat Earth, right? How would those two things sort of come to coincide?
So flat earthers, for the most part, generally really poo-poo gravity. It's just a theory. It's not provable because in a lot of their experiments, it seems to not make sense with what they're doing. And you can make with that if you want. But what they do agree with is usually the matter of density. I can't remember what the correct term is for
It's
it,
like-
but you know, there's
Right.
there's the heavier things, depending on the density of the materials, stack up on one another. That's where things get caught. So like rock, you know, water floats on top of that, air floats on top of that, space. You know, if you believe in space, which many of them don't, which is a whole nother really interesting thing. It gets back to the NASA dishonesty.
Right.
I'm not saying we haven't been to space, but I've seen no evidence of that, and the videos of NASA just are ridiculous to me.
What about those satellites that you see?
So this is the
Because
satellites.
that's something you wouldn't have seen when this guy was around.
photos from the satellites, all of these
Yeah.
50 years of photos from satellites. None of them are real.
Yeah. Okay, so it depends on what you're calling real. Are they things in low Earth orbit? Yes. Are they in space? Well, no. I think even now they admit that they're not technically in space.
Like space being the atmosphere around Earth, they don't leave the atmosphere technically.
They don't leave Earth's orbit.
The stratosphere, whatever.
Right.
They don't leave the orbit.
Yeah.
So wouldn't the idea of an orbit be outside of the wouldn't that sort of disprove flat Earth?
Well, so they
Oh,
definitely
it's just seeing what's underneath.
they don't believe that the Earth is spinning. That's definitely one of the main things,
Right.
and they don't believe that you get to a point where you're just floating. You know, there's so much information that people have come up with specifically about this subject, and I don't feel that I could do it justice commenting
Fair.
on it. I mean,
Fair.
if I prepared for a little bit, we could talk about it. And it's not that I don't believe these things happened or aren't real. It's an
inherently interesting subject. You know what I'm
It's
saying?
possible that NASA has done all the things they've done,
Hmm.
but if you go and analyze their photographs, all the things,
Their
nothing
compilations,
makes sense.
you know what I'm
So
saying,
you know,
oftentimes.
the globe Earth has never been photographed, and for a long time they'd say, "Oh yeah, I know we photographed the globe Earth." Well, there was a lawsuit against NASA, and someone said, "No, this is CGI. This isn't possible."
Hmm.
And they came out and said, "Okay, you're right. None of the photos of the Earth are real." And then all
Yeah,
the
well, I don't think so. I think the CGI is, I don't know if that's the correct terminology, and real, I think, is a little bit, I'd like to clarify. I believe what I've seen is the majority of pictures of the Earth are compilations of multiple pictures put together.
Absolutely, that's what it's supposed to be. That's
Right.
what it's supposed to be. Okay, but like the moon from Earth with the astronaut Apollo standing with the flag that
Right,
above it,
right.
that's been shown to be layered in. That's
Right.
absolute. And there's
That-
actually
that-
a lot of quotes from NASA admitting that these aren't real photographs. Some of them are compilations.
Right.
Now here's where it gets really interesting too. Again, Neil deGrasse Tyson with this stuff. But so Earth isn't a round marble, and he's admitted that. First it was oblique spheroid, sphere, and then later now they're saying it's pear shaped.
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
so-
but you would say that, according to the science that is generally accepted, they say that the Earth is approximately. I'm blanking now. I don't know if it's 12,000 in circumference or 24, but big number, right?
24 or 25.
But the difference between the highest point of the sphere would be about K1, right? The top of the Nepalese mountains,
Right.
the Himalayas,
Okay.
and then the deepest part would be about 7 miles. So the 5 miles and 7 miles are the highest and lowest, and that's in the Marianas Trench.
Yep.
And so if the deepest between the highest and the lowest points on the Earth's surface are 12 miles, and that would be 1/2 of 1%. 12 miles to
Okay.
24,000. No, that'd be one. Yeah, it'd be a very small amount. Very small amount.
Right.
So it being spherical, it being smooth,
Mhm.
and then also the circumference from the poles and the circumference around the equator being the difference of a very small amount of miles, wouldn't it be, for intents and purposes, a sphere?
Well,
By those calculations?
yes, but it's not, and NASA even says it's not.
Oh, yeah, it's a little bit wider on the equator. It's like a fat.
Well, they
it's,
won't.
it's like me. You know
They
what I'm saying?
won't
It's a
tell
little
us
wider on the
exactly.
equator.
They've actually never said exactly what it is, and it's changed quite a few times. So just the fact that we've been showed pictures all our life of this marble
Presented
this- as reality, and they did,
as single frame pictures or single snapshots.
and they absolutely, they let the public believe that they were actual photos, even some of the ones from space. Anyway, it's just there's lots of discrepancies. NASA has admitted that those aren't real. There was a lawsuit against them that someone won for perpetrating the globe Earth pictures, which were compilations.
I hadn't heard anything about that.
Yeah, you can look it up. It's interesting.
So, Dad, maybe you can speak a little bit about this, about NASA. So, I was negative 30 or so when the United States, the National Academy of Science or whatever, NASA, I can't think right now. I was, whatever, not alive around in 1969 or when that first happened. But I'm a little bit aware of the events, right? We were in a space race, an arms race, a competition with the USSR. We were losing pretty badly. We spent all this money trying to make a pen that works without gravity, and they had used a pencil. We were just behind the 8 ball, right? They said unmanned mission, they sent a dog. We were behind in both of those, but then all of a sudden, we put a couple, cowboys from the Midwest in a tin can banging around a little bit, and all of a sudden we've been on Earth, and there's flags waving in wind that doesn't exist.
Yeah, tell.
So, but can you speak a little bit about the events that were going on around then, from your perspective?
Here's what I want to say: if the Earth is not like it is,
Cognitive dissonance.
They're sending the what Bezos, what his name is?
Yeah, Jeff Bezos,
right,
and
the blue penis.
Musk, whatever that guy. They're sending these things up, and they're sending up just regular folks, up, and they're getting up higher than where they can look back at the Earth and see it. So this Earth that they're looking at is not real. Obviously, somehow, these people are getting into this rocket. We see it shooting off. That's a reality. They get up there and they look back at the Earth and they see it. But I've heard the term holograms used a lot.
Sure.
So are they looking at are you saying that they're looking at a hologram, and Bezos and Musk and all of these guys have to be in on this whole thing?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to.
We could go on more than that. I think they are going up somewhere. It's still low Earth orbit. It's so interesting. Musk has frequently said, "Well, it's real because it looks fake," and that doesn't make any sense.
Well, Musk. I can't take anything he says face value.
He's a tool, and the thing is, these people are extensions of the U.S. government. They're not really, when you look into it and who they are, and the defense departments and who they're related to. They're not really these independent businesses. Maybe on some level they are, but these people are extremely well connected. They're part of the U.S. government. Maybe not officially, but they really are. And they play an integral role in the structure of our reality here in the United States and other places.
But some of these people who are going up now are just people.
Are they though? Do we know them? They're presented that way. I have a hard time believing that just anybody gets to go up to space. They're pretty selective about it. The Challenger was a whole crazy thing we could get into, and that was not how it was presented.
So, what I think,
it's a question. That's all. I'm not
what
officially disagreeing. I'm just saying,
no. You're presenting it. This is why this conversation is so interesting.
I'm loving it.
Because you have this perspective that we're not as educated on, and we're just able to have this conversation and explore, and it's so interesting, man. The world is infinite outwards, allegedly, but it's also infinite inwards. There's never been two people who've had the same combination of experiences, and having a conversation with somebody that's very well versed in something that's not commonly held. A knowledge that's not commonly attained is super interesting.
We should all be doing that
100%.
all the time.
If you're not questioning what's going on around you, that's something that Neil deGrasse definitely, for his lack of nuance in speaking with the flat Earth community, that is something he always advocates for. Is question what's going on around you. It's just as lazy to accept everything is real as it is to accept that everything's fake.
Oh, that
you know what I'm saying?
So contradictory for him. And this is, again, my whole thing with the flat Earth, why I love it and find it so interesting, is because people are going out there and testing it.
Right.
They're doing these things with drones. They're doing things with lasers. Because the main thing is they don't trust anything NASA has put out. And we could do a whole podcast on that. But it's great to see people taking science into their own hands and trying to prove these things with experiments that they can do with the resources they have. And I love that, and I think we should all be doing that.
I agree that any hunger for knowledge and your own experimentation is really important. But I do think there is a flip side to this. I do believe that it is important for education and for folks to be able to learn and grow. And I think a healthy thirst for knowledge is important. I also think that you can get into a community like this, enter shoot, I'm blanking on words right now. Enter a community that sort of only speaks with itself. There's a word for that.
Sure, oh my
I mean, we're
gosh.
both doing it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
You can enter a community.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can enter a
Confirming.
community that only tracks to themselves. You can distrust evidence to the contrary and only, trust evidence that proves
That's
that your theory.
presented by like-minded individuals.
Exactly.
And therefore,
And so I think it can be dangerous to I think a vehicle to really start to shake the foundations of a government would be introducing a lot of discourse in places where absolute truths have been generally accepted. I still think it's really important to thirst for knowledge and to question the world around you, but I also believe that there are those who have nefarious intentions for the United States. And at the end of the day, as much as I want one world that all works together and one world that has a common goal, and I do believe that if we all were to get together and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, I do believe this is possible, that we can solve things like hunger and
Sure.
dying from preventable diseases.
Sure.
And I really have been trying to maintain this sort of childlike view of the world, that it doesn't need to be the way that it is.
That's great. Yeah. And we should all hold a view of what we think the
Yes.
ideal should be, and not be too discouraged by the state of affairs or
100%.
what the media tells us the state of affairs.
100%.
And-
But on the other hand, we also have to look at the world the way that it is.
Absolutely.
And there are states and non-state actors that wish to see the United States be less successful than it is. And you do have to be on the lookout for intentional campaigns to misinform the public, to
Misdirection.
destabilize the public. And so it is a sort of a dichotomy between a general curiosity for the world and a healthy mistrust of the facts as they're presented, but also being aware that there are those who wish to intentionally shake the foundations of America.
Yeah. Wow.
That's a big chunk right there, the misinformation that is purposely spread around it. Like the thing with the birds thing,
Yeah.
bring that out and saying what he did it with not harmful intentions.
No.
But also,
It
who's
was
to
to
say
be-
that this wasn't a discovery he had made, and then they paid folks to for him to go out and say that it wasn't true,
That it
to
was-
try to
yeah.
discredit it.
Well, that's
Can
what
you-
his followers are doing now. They're saying, well, we still believe it anyway.
Now, as
Some of them.
if I were somebody that held a belief that was to the contrary of what a lot of people held, if somebody were to say me holding my belief could be an issue of national security, I would feel a certain way about it. Of course. Now, can you speak to those who say that a campaign of misinformation has been intentionally levied in the United States by outside powers, and how that could potentially affect a community that believed it?
You mean purpose misdirection or misinformation campaigned by foreign powers in the United States? Is it?
Right.
I feel like
by foreign powers and domestic. There are people working.
subversive or
Yeah.
yeah.
There are people working. I have to say this
Yeah.
to purposely dismantle this thing we call democracy. Yeah. To purposely
Yeah.
dismantle it.
That's
And misinformation is one of the things. I mean, now
Well, let's let Jay here talk a little bit, but I just want to sort of see how it's very difficult to discern any naturally occurring curiosity and distrust that can sort of come out of that, and any intentionally implemented distrust and lack of sort of social cohesion. Can you sort of speak on how that could be a factor or may not be a factor within the letter?
it's really impossible to discern what is and isn't. I mean that's assuming that something we know is for sure accurate and true, and unless you can go out and test that and prove that yourself, it's indoctrination. You're just working with someone else's belief or indoctrination that is accurate and that is true. It doesn't mean that somebody else's truth couldn't be true. One of them might be healthier, or the cohesion of that belief might help move people forward in a certain direction. But yeah, I mean, critical thinking is huge, and we don't really have that so much in our nation. It's not taught. We're not taught the trivium or the quadrivium, or how to
Well, I think we're taught the scientific method pretty generally, right? To take not an assumption, but to make a hypothesis and test that.
Yeah, I feel like we don't do that so much more anymore with science. I really feel like we're told to believe, what Pfizer tells us to believe, but whether or not that's a good or a bad thing doesn't matter. We're just, even then when they backtrack and say different things and they're efficient, all these numbers change, but it's like, still, no, just trust us. Even though what we said in the beginning is completely not true, and we've determined that, you should still believe us and trust us. And that might be healthy for a nation in some ways. And it might also be destroying a nation. This is what I'm saying. It's like these are two very different views, and the idea that one of them is correct or incorrect is hard to prove. They definitely lead to different conclusions. Whether that's good or bad for us it's really complicated. I find that really a complicated thing to agree or disagree with.
Okay. Yeah. Well.
Does that make sense?
No, a little bit. What you're saying. I think to sort of boil it down is it's difficult to discern people's genuine curiosity and people's genuine desire to search for the truth in a world where they think that hasn't been found yet. It's difficult to discern that from folks intentionally putting forth information that subverts the generally understood truth.
It's been an absolutely interesting conversation, Jay. I did what I had told Donnie I was going to do. I was going to hold myself back and just sit and let you guys talk. And believe it or not, probably for the first time, I did it. And it has been absolutely wonderful. We're going to do a follow-up because I love this. I want people to see this place, learn the history of it. This is when I walked in here, it was like walking back into 1966, 67. The hippie place. I mean, this is you can look at it. This is home. This is lived in. This is the real world.
Right.
This is a commune from the 60s, 70s. That's the origin of this.
Yeah, this is the real world.
It's got great stuff.
So let me ask you, Jay. Do you have any closing remarks or statements that you would like to tell the folks?
Gosh, we covered so much. I really just want to say it's beautiful, and everyone should be able to have conversations like this. Whether you agree or disagree, you can learn so much or come to common ground. Or yeah, if you can educate each other, that's beautiful too. But even if you don't, just coming to a place of understanding with other individuals and not, I don't think anyone felt like we were crazy or different or even had that varying common ground, but it's beautiful. It's really beautiful to me to come together with someone else and discuss things that we have different views on, and I think the world's really missing that, especially with social media. It's a whole different thing.
Right.
So to come together in the live, in the flesh, and just discuss things and build and reason, like, I think it's beautiful. I think it's really beautiful. I really appreciate you guys. I can't remember the last time I had a conversation like this, and I feel like I used to have them all the time when I was younger, before social media was a thing.
Right.
So I really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. I'd love to discuss more, but thank you.
And we will. We will.
Yeah, we definitely will. I'm going to come and do a history of this place, and we'll do another show with you, and we'll dive deeper into
yeah.
Because there's so much to.
There's so much to talk about.
Could I do a quick plug?
Of
course,
please.
So I worked in nutrition for almost 20 years. I have a business with my brother. We originally started to help people get off drugs, various herbs and supplements. As of now, it tends to mostly be kratom and kava and things like this, but we just made an amazing CBD product. So if anyone's looking for CBD, really, I've won numerous awards for making hash, and I've transitioned that knowledge into making CBD.
Is it non-psychoactive?
Yeah, absolutely not. It's less than 0.2% THC.
There you go.
It's got all the cannabinoids. It's got CBDA, CBD, CBG. It's got myrcene, which is the terpene you want for pain relief.
Okay.
Anyway,
Is that last question? Is that what it's used for? Is it a salve? What are the
oh,
products
it's
used for?
so we do a tincture. Actually, it's in an olive oil base
Okay.
because that preserves it and it helps the body absorb it like a food. Could actually go on and on about it, but yeah, it's in an olive oil base. A lot of companies just extract CBD and put it in alcohol. Ours is the whole hemp plant. It's a very special one we sourced, so you get most of the cannabinoids, which we call the entourage effect. So you get a plethora of health benefits as opposed to just buying single CBD.
There you go.
I'm proud of it. It's the best one I've ever seen on the market, and I've tried dozens.
So how does one contact you about it?
The main website. Well, let me just give you the easiest one is www.mu-cbd.com.
Is that MOO?
mu-cbd.com.
mu.cbd.com.
The main website is musynergetics.com. That's musynergetics.com. But you can get there from mu-cbd.com.
Gotcha.
I'm proud of it. I'm super, super proud of what we do. So
Good stuff, brother.
if anyone's interested, you can also call us. You can find the number on there or email us with any questions. But
All right.
it's the best.
I'd just like to plug what we usually plug. Similar to the conversation we had, knowledge is important. So go out and gather that knowledge, and I find it very important to go vote. You know, a civil duty. Make sure your voice is heard. Make sure you don't just go and check boxes that other people tell you to either. Learn about the issues, learn about the candidates, find those that are in the same vein of your beliefs, and cast your vote, man. Even in California, where blue reigns supreme, it's still important, and it's important that you do it to continue the tradition on to other folks, because you never know where you'll end up or they'll end up. So please, get informed, get educated, and go vote.
And before we tell people to go vote, you have to get registered to vote. So a lot of people are not even registered. And I want people to, if you know people who don't vote, and I know people who run their mouth about how bad things are, blah, 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 and they've never voted in their life, and I'm calling them to task about that. If you know people who don't vote, sit down and talk with them and let them know how important it is to participate in this thing we call democracy. And the vote is one of the main wheels of the wagon of democracy.
100%.
If you don't vote, then the people who do vote get their vote.
Right.
So,
And it tends to be the folks that do vote are older and have the money and the resources to take time off of work.
Yeah.
But it's very important that you still do what you can to get out there, to get registered, to get informed, and to go vote.
and people in the minority neighborhoods, I must say this, get that crap out of your head that there's been
That your vote doesn't matter.
that your vote
It does.
doesn't count.
100%.
That's a bunch of propaganda that was put into your neighborhood since the early 60s to keep people.
So I got to comment on this because I'm one of those people from a young age that believe that your vote doesn't matter as against voting. So here's the truth, or how I feel about it. Voting in your local elections and what's going on in your community is one of the most important things, and that's probably the biggest impact you can have on the reality of your people around, even if you don't agree with.
And that's the one that most people skip.
Yeah, well, because most of us grow up with this idea that it's Democrat, Republican, Coke, or Pepsi. To me, like whatever, they're almost the same thing. They're both Wall Street. Anyway, that doesn't matter. But I do believe that absolutely we can have an influence in the things much closer to us, and there's no way that your vote doesn't matter in that respect. Who knows what's going on the larger political level, but get involved, get aware of what's going on in your community,
Right.
and make a difference, especially since so many people don't do that. Your vote is even more valuable.
Oh, yeah.
You can really change things from grassroots level up. So
Go vote. 100%.
Yeah.
And then tour dates? Where are you playing?
Myself, yeah, you can catch me in Monterey every second Saturday of the month at Bonton Elroy's Lighthouse Smokehouse. I may even start doing it every Saturday night. We were talking about that when I was there just last night. But anyway, Monterey every second Saturday. If you want to catch alligator, you come on down. I'm not sitting down like this. It's my wild show. And what I got to say is we're going to have to to cut this off real soon because this is my second tequila, and by my third tequila, I'm gonna be out in the front yard shooting my guns.
I'm not doing this podcast if he takes his pants off. But hey, thank you guys so much for checking it out. Thank you so much, Jay, for being on the show.
Much. I
It's
really,
been very
really
much so a
appreciate
pleasure.
it. Really
My
enjoyed
friend,
this.
we're gonna do it again.
But
Donnie?
one last
I hope
song to
so.
leave you before we're done.
Give me my mandolin.
Sounds like a plan.
What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do Motown,
I'll trade you. How's that sound?
alligator style.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Let's see what we got. This has been very, very interesting. Okay, excuse me, it's taking so long.
You can always cut around this. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Here we go.
Make sure to thank Jeb before you're done, alright? Good call. I think we're gonna cut around this part right here.
Come on, man.
It'd be interesting to talk about ways to build housing for people, which is important.
Huge problem. 100%, that'd be great.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion.
Here we
Have
go.
a conversation.
Yeah, I'm very invested in the homeless part.
Motown. Hey! Motown. Hey! Baby, baby, don't leave me. Please don't leave me all by myself. Hey! Came into my life so tenderly with a burning love that stings like a bee. Baby, don't leave me. Please don't leave me all by myself. Let me tell you, when you first met me, you said I was the perfect guy. Now that you got me, you want to leave me behind. Hey, baby, ha, baby. Baby, 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 baby. Hey! One more time. Stop in the name of love before you break my heart. You got to stop in the name of love. Hey! Before you break my heart, think it over. Haven't I been good to you? Haven't I been sweet to you? Now, darling, I may be a mental midget, but I figured this one out. Baby, I'm aware of where you're going. Each time you leave my door, I see you walking down the street. I know you got a love to me. Hey! But this time before you run to him, leaving me alone and hurt. Think it over. Haven't I been good to you? Baby, stop. In the name of love. Before you break my Baby, don't leave me. Please don't leave me. Alligator in Alignment. I like to think. Jet.
Yes, sir.
Jet. Okay, excuse me, I'm bad with names. I'm just meeting you guys. We're gonna come back here and from this moment on, we're friends.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Are we friends?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
100%.
I'm glad we said we're friends.
Oh, yes.
Now I can say what I really want to say. Friends, I need to borrow some money.
Me too.
Baby. Alligator in Alignment. We will see you guys real soon. Happy trails.